Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. Let's look at the agenda. Our goal today is to provide you a relatively high-level understanding of the 7 data analytical tools identified in the agenda. Amanda, can you switch over to the second slide there?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and there the tools are laid out. The keyword expansion, find similar documents, concept searching, clustering, textual near dupes, email threading, and active learning. We hope that by giving you this high-level overview that you're going to really find them to be quite valuable and that you're going to want to do a deeper dive and actually learn how to use them yourself. We're not going to hands-on have you learn them today. This is a webinar, not a workshop, but we're hopeful that you will find these valuable enough that you'll want to do further education and want to learn how to do them yourself. Anybody can learn them. I mean, I've learned them, so you can certainly learn them. They are much simpler than you might think. So a couple just introductory things. Please keep your mics off. And we are going to leave the last 5 or 10 minutes to open up mics to have discussion and any verbal questions. Having said that, throughout today or this webinar, please, there's a Q&A button right at the bottom of your screen, and don't hesitate to shoot us any questions that you might have. So, my name is Jay Yelton. I'm a litigation attorney for since 1986. Started in Chicago for 4 years, then came back to my home state of Michigan and joined Miller Canfield for 24 years. And for the last 6 years, I've been a partner at Warner Norcross and Judd. Started specializing in e-discovery, or it wasn't e-discovery at the time, it was really just called discovery management in the early 1990s. And since then developed a e-discovery and data review team both at Miller Canfield and then again later at Warner. Most recently, I'm focusing on e-discovery mediation, and I currently serve as the president of the Detroit chapter of the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists, otherwise known as ACEDS. You'll hear reference to ACEDS a couple times today. So, Acorn Legal Solutions is one of our ACEDS Detroit chapter sponsors and can help you with the understanding and actually using and providing you access to these tools that we're going to be talking about today. Acorn is headquartered in Chicago, but they have team members throughout the Midwest. And one of their team members is Amanda Cook, who is joining me today to conduct this webinar. Amanda Cook is an attorney, a senior project advisor as well, with 13 years experience, including as an associate attorney at a law firm in Pittsburgh and as an e-discovery project manager, both in Chicago and in Boston. Amanda is certified as an e-discovery or ACEDS e-discovery specialist, and she also has relativity certification, both as a user and an administrator. So the objective today, as I've said, is really to give you that high-level overview so you become comfortable and familiar with 7 data analytical tools. ACEDS' purpose is to promote professional growth and education. And we have a strict non-solicitation policy. So today's webinar is not intended to promote Warner Norcross, Acorn, or Relativity. It is to allow you to get comfortable with and to promote the increased use of data analytical tools. So, but before we get started, what I'd like to do is give you just a few reasons why I really feel these use of data analytical tools is so essential and gets more essential every month, every year, as we continue to go forward. And the first reason for that is attorneys have an ethical obligation to understand and to leverage technology. And as you can see, this is going back 8 years ago with respect to the ABA model rule. And the comment that was amended to be very clear about it. We as lawyers have a duty to understand the benefits and the risks associated with technology. So, effective January 1st, 2020, Michigan became the 37th state to adopt a similar ethical duty. So I think you're going to start seeing attorneys being held accountable for violating these obligations by courts going forward. So that's reason one. Reason number two is that many state and federal courts are now amending their court rules, or have over the last 4 to 5 years, that provide that there's going to be ESI conferences and that attorneys have to create ESI discovery plans. Step back, ESI is an acronym for electronically stored information. So You'll see that throughout these slides and in our discussion, but that's all it is. It's electronic data. So you're going to have to understand those court rules to be able to comply with federal and state court. I'm citing to some of the more recent ones in Michigan. Again, this one, another one, but it's very similar to many other states. The court rules that explicitly say, beyond the ethical duty, we have a court rule duty that if you're going to participate in these conferences and create discovery plans, you need to have some ESI competence. So that's really important. And the next slide will show you even other rules where this technology competence is so important. Both federal rule and Michigan and many, if not all other states have one of their first court rules that talks about it is our duty to handle these litigation matters as quickly and as justly and as economically as one can. But maybe even, or at least more recent, is the scope of discovery. Federal rules 5 years ago amended to include the phrase proportionality. Michigan just added it. Many other states have it. But the point of proportionality is that how costly is discovery? And you have to compare the cost versus the burden. Well, you can't undertake that analysis without understanding the tools that can reduce cost and can reduce burden. So for all of those reasons, it's really important to do what you're doing, which is undertaking some education on the topic. So, but we felt the best way to really understand this is to kind of walk through a case study, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to use the same case study today as we're going to use in the follow-up workshop if you're signed up for that for next week, and we'll make reference to that follow-up workshop at several points because when we started this whole creation of this educational opportunity, we merged the webinar and the workshop together, and we did a couple demos, and they encouraged us to step back and say, do one on the webinar, talking about the law, talking about the reasons, giving a high-level overview without delving into the database. And so we split it up. So no one's required to go to both, but really encourage the pattern you'll see. This is an intro to what's happening next week, and we're going to use the same case study for both of those. So as we go through this case study today, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda in just a few minutes, or in a minute. She's going to talk about the tool, and then I'll just chime in for a comment or two about how that tool could be useful for this particular case study. So if you don't mind, boring as it is, I'm just going to read through the facts here on the case study because, again, I think it's helpful for you to understand the value, and then we'll talk at the end of this webinar about how you can save money in this type of case study. So, and also one other thing about this case study, if you get to the workshop, it's a database, and the database has the data relevant to this case study, which is really, I think, helpful. So what we did is the case study is in November of 2000, Enron and eMetra entered into a price posting agreement, underlying contract between two parties that eMetra would pay Enron for the ability to display Enron's prices for certain metals for trading on their platform. And paragraph 16 of that agreement is entitled to force majeure, and it provided a list of events and circumstances which would excuse a party's non-performance of their contractual obligation. And the price posting agreement also included a limitation on liability provision. Those are the two key things for this case study. A year and a half later, in June 2002, numerous countries were impacted by a coronavirus, which the World Health Organization categorized as a pandemic. As a consequence, many countries, including England and the United States, imposed stay-at-home restrictions on non-essential workers, which resulted in many companies completely shutting down their operations. In fact, eMetra furloughed 25% of their workforce and discontinued the operation of their platform for 2 months. So, next slide. As a result, Enron sues eMetra for a breach of the price posting agreement in federal court in the Eastern District of Michigan. Enron seeks $250 million in damages based on lost sales during the 2 months that the platform was non-operational. eMetra filed a motion to dismiss based on the force majeure paragraph. Even if eMetra does not prevail on that with that defense, eMetra believes the limitation on liability provision will eliminate 95% of the damages. So finally, on the last slide of the case study, It's now. We're in April 2003, and Enron has retained you to assist them with designing and defending and implementing a discovery plan for this case, and to prepare for an ESI conference with the court and with eMetro. Enron has already implemented a preservation plan a few months ago, and when they realized that litigation was reasonably likely to occur, and they conducted an initial search of relevant documents. They identified 10 custodians, utilized some search terms, as you can see in the slide, and identified over 60,000 potentially relevant documents. They processed those documents, and approximately 10,000 documents were removed as being clearly irrelevant, whether spam, denisting, deduping, and the remaining 49,832 documents were uploaded onto a database for you to review. And so with that, the next slide will show that's where it's at, but we're going to have a conference here, and we're in the Eastern District of Michigan, as I mentioned, and it clearly says the federal court rules require that the parties are going to have an e-discovery meet and confer. And the particular rule, the model order, Eastern District, which is very similar to many other jurisdictions, it will tell you the type of topics you have to discuss. And it's frankly impossible to have intelligent discussions on these topics without understanding data analytics and the various tools that they have. So with that, we have 49,832 documents in a database. They turned it over to you, and I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who's going to give you an overview of data analytics, and then going to start jumping into what are the 7 tools and give us a good description of each.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it. And the first question I think that probably comes to everyone's mind is, where do we use analytics? Generally, when we are conducting a review for a litigation matter, it's conducted linearly with eyes on every single document. If you get sued, your email will get collected and someone will look at every single email in your account. And as you can imagine, this would be incredibly expensive, as the industry benchmark for cost of review is $1 a document. So let's say we can collect my inbox that has 20,000 emails and someone has to review every single one of those. Then that's $20,000 for one single email. Most businesses, as you know, don't just have one single email. We have lots of employees. So if I have 2 other people who I work with who have to collect their email and they have the same number, that's $60,000 to review 3 people's emails for relevance. And in general, probably maybe 10% of that might actually be relevant. So we've now spent $54,000 that could be directed to better litigation objectives than just doing document review. And as data continues to grow, with all these different data sources, with Zoom and all these ways we're working from home now, this is the impact of analytics on your case can be huge in terms of culling and reducing and getting you to the universe of documents that you need for your case. And analytics can be a game changer here. What we at Acorn do and many other platforms is we take the technology to help you find the documents that you need faster and help you find what you don't need. And that way you're not spending your whole litigation budget blowing it out on a doc review. And we've all heard about AI and predictive analysis with Google and with our phones giving us targeted ads on Facebook, and Spotify predicting your next song, or Netflix suggesting your next movie. And e-discovery works a little bit differently than that. It's used to help you understand the whole of your case, basically. What's happened? What documents do I need to find? How do I find ones that look exactly the same as the documents that I'm looking at? And through the webinar today and the concepts that Jay and I are going to be covering, you'll find that using analytics for your case can save you time and money, no matter how big or small the case. I would suggest any case would benefit from analytics. And we'll be going through examples of both structured and conceptual analytics and how they can benefit your case workflow. And so just a brief overview of structured versus conceptual. Structured analytics are built using exact textual comparisons between documents. The analytics tool scores document attributes and relationships. So, for example, I get an email from Amazon every single day with their Kindle daily book deals. So if you collected my email, you'd be collecting thousands and thousands of Amazon deal of the day emails. And those are clearly not going to be relevant to much of anything unless I'm in trouble for buying too many books. The structured analytics, it can identify those documents and I can remove them from the review set entirely. Some common ways we use them is in email threading and near deduplication. And we'll get more into those later in the webinar, but conceptual analytics, in contrast, is more concerned with ideas and concepts that are contained within the documents. It doesn't rely on exact syntax or word order or phrasing to identify similarities between the documents. Some examples of this are you can organize your documents by concept cluster. You can create an exemplar document to find the closest version that you may have in your data, and the use of predictive coding. You would typically use conceptual analytics after you've already removed duplicative information and to only find the documents that you want to see. Basically narrow your universe down to the set that you want to look at. And I will be jumping to the next slide. So the first tool we're going to talk about is keyword expansion, which uses conceptual analytics to help you figure out what you may have missed in your search terms. Sorry, excuse me. One of the challenges that come up with a large document set is that you don't always know what you're looking for. You may have a sense from your client, if you're lucky, or if they're telling you the whole truth of what the kind of things that you need to find, but you then have to take those concepts and search a huge set of data to find specific information. And you may not know what to search for, what words to use, how to phrase it, what words would generate too many positives, like false positives or false negatives, or miss the data entirely. And there's always a concern that you're missing a key term, but you don't know what it is. And keyword expansion allows you to run search terms on your data set, and the software goes in and it will look at all the documents and it will identify what concepts are closely related to your search term. It isn't like saying accounting and finance are the same or similar search terms. So I search for accounting, the software will suggest finance. It's saying that in this data set, this specific code word is conceptually similar to another word. No one without knowledge of a code word would be able to link that concept. And so the software does the work in the background for you, so you don't have to spend all this time crafting search terms after search term to get to the meaty keywords that you're looking for. And it can help you find jargon, misspellings, and other information that you might not be able to identify without looking at every single document. And it can also improve your keyword list to find best documents quicker and help you learn sort of the lingo of the case. So let's see. And this, if you look at the right, that is essentially what it looks like in relativity. You can see that there is a score. There's a term at the top, and that you enter it right at the top, right over here. Sorry, let me get my mouse. And it will return a set of hits that it thinks are conceptually similar and give you a score for how conceptually similar those terms are. You can include and exclude keywords and refresh your list, and it allows you to really test and QC your search terms against your documents and find terms that could potentially have been missed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay to talk about its application in our test case.
Yeah, exactly. As we talked about, we're about to go off to a meet and confer. We have some search terms we already use, force majeure, limitation, liability. Those terms might be very good. They may be over-inclusive. They may be under-inclusive. We don't know. And you would like to know that before you walk into a meet and confer and before you commit to what search terms you're going to use. So this type of tool, this keyword expansion, allows you to identify maybe more narrow search terms or slightly broader search terms. So this is definitely something you would use in our case study early on as you're preparing for the meet and confer.
Great. And with that, we're going to move to the concept of finding similar documents. In relativity, you can use find similar documents to ensure that people are coding similar documents consistently. So, for example, you have a team of 5 people who are looking through 100,000 documents. And I think, as anybody would guess, 5 people often have very different opinions about what is or is not relevant. And so you can use find similar to help ensure you're having consistent coding. It can also help you find documents more like the ones that you already have. So if you had a section of a document that was very relevant to your case, you can use that to find other documents that are similar to that. And it's more expansive than keyword searching because keyword searching will only bring back the exact documents you're looking for. Finding similar can return documents that are conceptually similar, but may not have the same text. And so essentially what the tool does is it looks for documents that have similar concepts, and you can use that to, you can also use it, I think one of the more powerful ways I've seen it used is you can create a seed document, which is basically your exemplar. This is our smoking gun, and you can load that into the database, and you can use that to find your smoking gun. And that can save a whole lot of time and a whole lot of review if you're able to jump immediately to a document that is exactly like what you're looking for. So with that, Jay, I think you can talk about the application to the case study.
Yes, as we said in the case study, our key document's called the price posting agreement. And one of the things you're wanting to do early on is finding, are there other documents similar to that? I mean, maybe prior drafts, different versions, and the sooner you see those in a case, you may be able to narrow your scope of discovery, or you may be able to help your client develop a litigation or a settlement strategy. So in this particular case, what the workshop will show next week, by taking that whole document, that price posting agreement, in doing this analysis, it will reduce in less than a few minutes 49,832 documents to 97 documents that are very similar to that underlying agreement between the parties. And so I think it's a very powerful tool. And in particular for this case study, like I said, within minutes, you've narrowed it down to less than 100 documents that you probably want to look at sooner than later.
Great. And the next topic we're going to discuss is concept searching. Concept searching is the technology that we used in the previous in Find Similar and Keyword Expansion. And it looks at concepts and not just the words in the documents. It's helpful when you know what you're looking for, but you're not sure how to find it. It can help you hone in on the data that would be helpful for your investigation. And as we mentioned previously, the results aren't based on exact keyword matches, but on similar conceptual content. And it basically automates the process of finding your documents quicker. Like with Finding Similar, some value that concept searching can provide is avoiding term mismatches like football versus soccer, pop versus soda, et cetera. And it also can help you avoid, say you have, I don't know, Project Red, and that is the relevant project in your litigation, and you don't know that because you haven't looked into the data, and it can find things like intentionally vague words to describe things, and it can also help you find misspellings and jargon of the case. And the ability to conceptually search documents is basically the basis of artificial intelligence and electronic discovery. And as with the other tools, it just basically helps you get to everything you need faster and sooner, which is in any litigation is a huge benefit. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
Yeah, what the workshop will show you is that you'll go into the database, you'll pull up that price posting agreement, you'll cut and paste the force majeure provision right out of that and throw it into this tool. And it will, again, narrow down from 49,000 documents down to 151 that have very similar concepts of force majeure provision. And you'll see it with other parties, other drafts, other versions. And again, that was huge. I mean, and that's just one use of it. As Amanda said, you can go in and create your own hot doc or smoking gun or whatever. But in this one, what you'll do, you'll walk through and you'll take out the key provision, and then you can do the same thing with limitation of liability provision. Cut and paste it, throw it in. It'll get you down to 100 or so documents of very similar concept.
Great. And so the next tool we're going to discuss is clustering. And clustering basically takes groups, universes of documents and groups them into different segments. And you can search within those segments or drill down into more specific statements or even down into the documents individually. It's a form of unsupervised analytics where it groups the documents by concept automatically. And it's similar to search term expansion in that it allows you to get a very 50,000-foot view of your data. And often data is collected by individual custodians, but there could be a lot of different types of data that are contained within those custodian files. And so you can see on the screen, we have, you know, custodian A has a star document, custodian B has a star document. And so what clustering does is it takes all of those stars and the squares and it puts them all together into a conceptual grouping. And that is probably a more efficient way to conduct review because you're not, you know, just sort of looking linearly through one custodian's data. And you know, you can see that it groups it by key terms, it can do it by date ranges, file types, and that way you're basically conducting a more efficient review. Okay, the relativity has a whole bunch of different ways that you can visualize these clusters. One of these is to your right on the screen right here, and this is basically the nested list view, and this is it's a hierarchical, that's a hard one, hierarchy of each document cluster, and this is the nested list view. This is what it looks like. We also have the circle pack view, and this visualizes the documents with a set of spiral circles, with each circle representing a cluster of conceptually similar documents. The terms next to the documents aren't keyword hits per se, they're the system concisely describing what the documents inside each cluster contain. And you can zoom into each cluster by clicking on it and kind of look at related ones. And you can also click on clusters or subclusters to delete them or select or deselect them, and it'll modify the document list below your circle pack. And this is a heat map. This is what it looks like inside relativity. And this shows you, if you run a search on top of the clusters, so we have needs for the review and designation is not set, it will show you, and you run a search term across this, it will show you which clusters are hottest for your search terms. The most relevant documents that need to be reviewed related to your agreements are the ones in the darkest blue, and sort of less so. You can kind of see the legend over here, how hot to your cluster that specific document may be. Adding more filters and search terms will generate a heat map overlay to show you the hit density in your results. And there's also, you can see the depth slider that can allow you to dive really deep into each cluster and get you to the universe of the most specific stuff that you need to look at faster. And the closest to the center of the cluster, the more conceptually similar a document is. And nearby clusters will show you basically whatever conceptual clusters are nearby and how close they are. The similarity scale shows you that the conceptually similar, shows you how a conceptually similar surrounding cluster is in order to be displayed, and you can change the values there, and it will take, you know, zoom in and zoom out and give you different results based on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Jay.
That was good. Yeah, this is one of the neatest of the 7 tools. I mean, obviously, the prior tools, we started off with search terms, which we had to come up with. We had to come up with an agreement or a paragraph that we wanted to use. This one's nothing like that. This is saying, you know what, I want to just step back and get a feel for, you know, we know there's 49,800 documents, okay? I don't want search terms to be how I narrow things down for this particular case. I want to get a big overview of it, and this is perfect for that. And that again will be walked through in the workshop. And the graphics are cool, but it's much cooler as you continue to drill down and you see what's hot and what's not, and it just allows you to, you know, I mean, you're going to have it up and on the screen and working with it within 5 minutes, but you could spend hours just kind of going down different paths and trying to find out what's important. And I think within an hour or so, you will really have a grasp of what was collected in that 49,000 right off the bat.
Great. And so the next issue we're going to talk about that the tool can help you with is near duplicates. And I know you're probably asking the question, what's the issue with near duplicates? And if you aren't looking at them closely, they may not look like near duplicates at all. They may look like actual duplicates. And can you guys find the differences in the photo from a quick scan because I think that these two, when you look at them real quick, they look exactly the same, but you can see that there are some substantive differences that are inside each document. So these would be considered near duplicates rather than actual duplicates or 100% duplicates. And textual near duplicates, again, arise when you have similar but not exactly the same kinds of documents. An area where this comes up a lot is in contracts, where you know, Jay and I both have an employment contract. It says the same terms. The difference is it's him and me. So that would be the substantive difference, but everything else would be the same. And they will look fairly identical, but depending on who, you know, who's the custodian or who's the parties in the case, my contract might be very important. And we wouldn't want to mistake that for a duplicate of something else. So we call that basically the tool does textual near duplicate identification. And this is when it's taking the text between the two documents and saying they're pretty similar, but they're not exactly the same. And you might want to review those documents in a different manner because you know, maybe you can just group a whole bunch together because they're contracts and you don't need to know that. You can just say they're responsive or not responsive. But you can also look at the differences between the documents. It'll redline and show you the differences so you can identify what's not the same between two documents. And relativity has a view that enables you to look at these all together. So you can, from a review perspective, you can take everything that's almost the same and just sort of knock it out quickly. And the structured, this is an example of structured analytics. It identifies the similar documents and it creates a relational group between them. And so you can also search and filter on your near dupe groups, conflict check coding decisions, check for privilege with other near duplicates. I think that's a place where it's very powerful. And the platform, as you can see on the right, that's kind of what it looks like when you're in the database. It displays the documents with a percentage similarity score, so you can see how similar they are. So that top one, you know, if you look, it's 97% similar to, you know, the 100 score. So this, if you're finding and identifying all of your near duplicates quickly, you can group them, code them, and ensure consistency in QC. It looks for basically just a word-for-word similarity between the documents. And with that, I will let Jay explain how it's useful in our case.
Yeah, like you said, Amanda, I mean, it's really good for contracts. In this case is a breach of contract case, and we have the price posting agreement, and we have, you know, numerous other documents very, very similar to it. And so using this tool on those agreements in this case, not only helps you quickly identify the documents themselves, but as you suggested, then when you get into coding and review and redaction of privilege or what, it's going to be very, very useful. And so this tool is definitely one that could be used in our case study.
Great. Okay, and sorry. Here we go. So the next tool we're going to talk about is email threading. And this most often, if you've done reviews or you've worked with attorneys who do reviews, you will receive the complaint very often that I have seen this email 700 times. Why do I keep having to see the same document? And it's not that it's the same document, it's that you are seeing multiple emails that are in a thread. And a thread basically is if, you know, I send an email to Jay, Jay sends it back to me, we go back and forth, say 6 or 7 times. That's going to be 6 or 7 unique documents that are going to go into the database. And it's definitely not efficient to review the same chain, the same document chain 7 times. So what we do with threading is it basically gives you the last in the chain, the most inclusive email is what we call it. So you don't have to review 7 documents, you just have to review the one that's at the end. And it arranges the emails that are all part of a single conversation, and we'll show you how to identify duplicate spares, which are emails with the same content, so that the ones that are lower in the thread. And it sorts the information so you can review each thread in context. So instead of seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 7 emails back and forth all over the database, you would see them in one group at the same time, and allows you to just review the most unique document. And what we focus on with threading is the most inclusive emails. The inclusive, as I kind of mentioned, is the one that contains all of the other preceding emails within it. The whole conversation can be contained in the top level, and you don't need to review all the others. Inclusive emails, as I mentioned, are the last email in a conversation. Anything you add to the last email would be unique to that email. It's also documents that have attachments, because if you have an attachment and the recipient replies, the attachments typically don't go with that reply. So we mark the attachments as inclusive, even if you don't change the text. And then if there are inline changes of text, say I forward Jay an email and he cuts out some of the content and replies back or forwards it to somewhere else, that is unique. So we would include that as an inclusive email as well. Keeping track of all this information in a cohesive and understandable view is a part of what relativity has to offer. They can also let you look at conversations in context. And I will show you what that looks like here. And so this is what email threading looks like inside relativity. As you can see, there's a whole lot of information that's contained here, like custodian, control number, where did it come from, who did it get sent to, is it the most inclusive, what type of document, and they also offer a different visualization that's a little bit more, I'd say, user-friendly than this specific view. So what you have here is basically, this is the email thread visualization, and this is a view in relativity that you can use to see, you know, how did this chain of emails go? So you have one, you can see it got sent here, it got sent there, somebody sent it over here, and then we have some over here. But you can also see that there's a question mark here in the center, and those are documents that are contained in the body of one of these threads, but that are not actually visible in your data. And so that could be important if that specific email, that missing email here, is not able to be, you know, you might need to go back and recollect data, or you might need to go ask your clients or custodians why those emails aren't included if they're in other bodies of emails. And if you look at this, the blue and the yellow are going to be the most inclusive. But so from, say, this is 20 emails, you really only need to look at these 5 because those contain everything. And the software will also show you, like I said, the ones that might be missing, and the visualization you can just click through here. You don't have to actually go back to the previous thread visualization. You can just click back and forth and sort of show you the context of the conversation. And this is the email threading summary. And from this one, you can see that anywhere from 20 to 60% of these documents are inclusive, and you don't really need to look at them because you're already going to see them inside other documents. So I think threading is very, very powerful. It certainly reduces frustration on the part of the people who have to look at the documents because they don't have to see the same thing 17 times. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay for the application to this case.
Yeah, this tool is wonderful for this case study because 31,819 of the 49,832 documents in our database are emails. And so as you work through this tool in the workshop, it will reduce it, like you say, by 25 to 30% of those emails you don't need to review. And that's going to, I mean, whether you're reviewing for responsiveness, privilege, confidentiality, right off the bat, this tool is going to reduce the quantity that's needed. And then for the remaining, what you do have to review, it's those emails are put in an organized manner for you. So it will expedite the follow-up review. So in this particular case study, this tool is wonderful. And when we wrap this up at the end, we're going to talk about the exact cost savings this tool alone has done for our case study.
Great. And with that, I'm going to jump into active learning. And active learning is essentially the software is building models to predict for you whether a doc is relevant. It takes the concepts and helps refine the model to make accurate predictions with confidence. And it basically works the same way as, you know, a Netflix would. You take a document and you give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And just like Netflix, they will return things that are similar to the thing that you said that you liked. And active learning basically works the same way. It sees the documents that you're looking at, whether you're interested in them or not, and starts making recommendations to you based on that. And it's a really, really simple model. You look at 10 documents, you make your decisions about whether they're relevant, and you code them, and the system updates the model. It'll then look at your documents that are left and provide a ranking of high to low, what documents you think you should look at. And then it'll give you 10 to 15 more, and it will rerun that sort of process of finding you things that are most relevant or not relevant. And it's very simple from a reviewer perspective. It's basically, you log in and you go and you just check out documents. So it's all happening in the background. It's not necessarily anything that a reviewer would even be aware of, other than they just go in and they log in and they click on their queue. And as a reviewer, you just click Start Review, and then it is ranking your choices. So right now, it's, if you see the top two, this is my prediction of what I think is relevant. I think the top two are the most relevant. And so these two will review, and then it will take those back and it will recode what it is based on what you're telling it. So it takes your input and makes predictions based on what you have identified as relevant to your matter. And, sorry. This is what the prediction engine does. And it basically uses inherent conceptual clustering and will start to predict where your documents are in terms of responsiveness. 100% over here on the right means we think this is super, super, super responsive, and 0 on the left means we don't absolutely not responsive to this litigation. For the documents in the middle, right now it's saying these aren't reviewed, so we don't know where they are, but maybe this one is a 52% likely to be responsive, and over here is, let's say 45% likely to not be, likely to be responsive, but we don't really know since we haven't reviewed yet. And so they kind of group everything in the middle at the outset of a project. And what you have here is, this is what an active learning project looks like. As you go through and you start coding your documents, you've coded these ones as responsive right here, and you've coded these ones as non-responsive. And what happens is the software predictions get more accurate as you continue to code. And instead of everything being clustered around the middle, like in the last slide, you start to see things kind of moving and shifting to the left over here. It was at 50 before, now you can see it's more to the left. And this, there's largely probably a huge subset of documents over here that are not responsive based on the decisions that you've made when you coded documents. And that's the purple, that's what we're learning from. This is the data we still have to review. And then down here is your prioritized review progress, and it will feed you. So if you use active learning, it's going to feed you the most responsive things based on your decisions first. And you can see at the outset, the first 200 documents or so, there are very responsive, right? It's almost 100%. And the second, and then you get to about 1,200 and you see a little bit of a drop. And then at 14, you see a really, really steep drop based on the coding decisions that you've been making. And that point at the 1,400 or 1,600 mark, I think that's a good point. You can go to opposing counsel or to the judge and say, hey, like the system is not finding things that are relevant to our litigation, and perhaps you can stop review. Or decide whether it's worth your time to keep spending the time and the money to look at more documents. And in the back end, this is all kind of the administrative stuff. You can start to get reports for reviewers, and you can review whether the reviewer is coding the document consistently with the responsiveness that the system has identified, and whether the system agrees with it. And you can kind of do all sorts of statistical ways to do it and use sample sizes. What's your confidence level, margin of error, and what rank? So rank would be we, 60% responsive, the system thinks. And you can run reports and generate for the specific reviewers how close they are to what the system is identifying. And you can also run results, test results. So these are, again, administrative tests that are built in on the back end. They basically allow you to supply advanced statistics to opposing or the judge. That's the way the software is predicting the documents are going to be coded is also the way that a person would code the documents. And that's an Elusion test. And that functionality basically says, okay, the software thinks this, we're going to take them and have humans look at them to confirm whether the human would have coded the document the same way. And all of this is built into relativity, and it's a part of our active learning process. That's kind of a high-level overview. We don't have an exercise on this for next week, but we will, if anybody is interested, please follow up with us and let us know. We can certainly get into more depth about this. But from a high level, it's very exciting. It's a very technical tool, and it has a huge impact on reducing costs in litigation. And it's an emerging area of e-discovery, as you probably all know. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay to see his thoughts.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it would be wonderful to be able to include this tool in the demo for next week. But as you probably can tell just based on those slides, it takes a little bit. If any of them are a touch more complex and cutting edge, this is the one. So we'll certainly talk some about it, but it will not be as much of a hands-on demo. That's going to have to be a later event, but very, very important. But the first step is let's do hands-on for the first 6 tools and get our hands around that and understand them. So yeah, if you can slide over to the next slide, if you don't mind, Amanda.
Sure, you got it.
And as we talked about at the beginning, the ethical rules and the court rules require us to do discovery in a speedy and inexpensive manner. And as a result, we have to understand technology and leverage technology. And so I'm not saying you have to use these tools on every case. Having said that, I do strongly believe you have to have thought about using these tools and be prepared to discuss whether or why. And I'll just come up with 2 examples. If you feel the discovery that the opposing party is requesting of you is overbroad and unduly burdensome, and you're going to file a motion to quash or a motion protective order, one of the big issues that's going to come up is proportionality, and the other side and or the court is going to be asking you, well, okay, you tell me it's going to take 4 months and $500,000. Have you leveraged technology to bring that cost down and reduce that time frame? You better be prepared to address that. If you're on the other side's fighting back from you. Your discovery requests are way too broad, way too expensive. You should be asking, well, are you leveraging technology? When you tell me this is going to cost you $500,000 and it's going to take you 6 months, how do you come up with that? And so on that proportionality analysis, knowing the tools, knowing when they're useful, how to do them is what you really need to get your arms around. So, the common excuses for not using these tools is really 2 that they're way too complicated, A, or B, they're way too expensive to be able to be used. And now, I got to tell you, years ago, those excuses probably had some, support. I really don't think they do anymore. I mean, hopefully this presentation showed you that the tools are not that complex. And I think that's why the workshop, I know this sounds like a hard sell, right, for the workshop next week. Having said that, we're not charging for it. So there really is not a hard sell. The reason I'm telling you the workshop is important is because actually I did 2 of these workshops, one at the Georgetown conference about a year ago, and then I did a follow-up one in Chicago. And both of them were very valuable, and both unfortunately cost me over $1,000 to attend. And it's like, we had to find a way to allow others to develop these skills without having to travel, without having to spend that type of money. And so that's what this is really intending to do. But it's modeled after those. I mean, the workshop will allow you to go in and do these over an hour and a half. And the leader of that workshop is Josh Treat. And We will certainly tell you about all his many certifications at that workshop, but he has many. But the most relevant ones is he has 10 different relativity certifications, including the highest level, which is a master. And so, yeah, there's his picture.
There we go. Pretty face.
Yeah. So, and you know, the certifications are all cool, but what's the best about Josh, in my personal opinion, is he simplifies it and makes it easy to understand. I mean, that's our goal. The last thing we're trying to do is, oh my gosh, look how complicated this is. You have to have the highest level professionals to be doing it. No, this is to allow you to get more comfortable and do it. And in fact, Amanda and Josh and their team have designed this workshop to be one in where you can go off into a breakout room by yourself or with one or two people with a trainer and ask any questions you want, okay, and to work through it. So you're not, hey, I'm lost. You know what I mean? That's fine. We're expecting that question, okay, and they'll be able to walk you through it. And another part of the value of the workshop is that you'll have this demo database of 49,000 documents for a period of time. I'm not sure if it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, but to allow you to go back in and to do the exercises yourself again with the workbooks that you'll have. I found it very valuable, and I hope you will find it valuable. And so that's really the concept here. So that's on the complexity question. Is it too complex? And I think the answer is no, but it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of effort to do that. But now let's talk about, is it too expensive? Okay. Well, in this case study, to take that amount of data that we talked about from the beginning, 60,000 documents, and to process it and get it down to 49,000 and put it on a database. Our experience is that cost to put that together, to use these tools, is around $1,700 to $2,800 to get that up and running, okay? Now let's just talk for a second about how much that can save you. And I'm not going to go through each of the tools and tell you how much it can save you. I'm going to focus just on one for a moment. And that's the issue on email threading, the most simple one. You know, we said there's 31,819 emails in this database. If they're averaging 2 pages each, that's 63,638. And if you can review and code and all that, 75 pages an hour, that's a project, if you're not using these tools, would take you 848.5 hours. And if you were to pay reviewers to do that, $100 an hour, it's an $84,850 project. Well, if you can use just email threading alone, nothing else, and you can reduce that that quantity by that 25 to 30% that we're talking about, that saves you from $20,000 to $30,000 just on email threading. So the $1,700 to $2,800 is nothing compared to the savings. And the speed by which you can increase it. So in each of those tools, I hope by the description that Amanda has provided you, I think you can get a feel for how much quicker and how much more efficient that's going to be. So we did want to make sure that we left a few minutes at the end here, and we do have about 7 minutes. You're welcome to, if you don't want to, I think hopefully either we or you can open up and unmute yourself. We welcome anyone else that's on to either throw out a question or frankly even throw out an idea or any other discussion that you would like to have in our final minutes. We don't have anything written down in our Q&A, but you're welcome to either shoot us a question or you know, unmute yourself and throw out a question or start a discussion. Either way, we just wanted to make sure, again, this is really supposed to be interactive. If there was something that Amanda said or that I said that was confusing, don't hesitate. I mean, please bring it up now, or you're welcome to shoot us an email after, and we're happy to follow up with you on that. So.
Let's see. And I don't see any questions have come through on the Q&A. So, yeah, we'd encourage you guys to join next week to register. We actually are at capacity at the moment, but we want to know what the general interest is and when we can schedule a follow-up workshop. So go ahead and register, and we will follow up with you guys. I appreciate Jay, your very able presentation, and for putting this all together for us. I think it's a very good intro to some high-level concepts that are really, really useful for people who work within the field and have to do review or have to manage reviews. But yeah, we hope if anybody, any questions?
Yeah, let me just follow up on that, Amanda. I mean, yeah,
Sure.
that is key. I mean, we're limiting that workshop to 10, I think approximately 10 people. And the reason for that is, again, we want it hands-on. I mean, we could do it for 25, but then our experience is people get lost. Actually, the best scenario to do this workshop is in person and having trainers kind of walk around. Both the times I did it, that's exactly the way it was, okay? And then I didn't feel embarrassed about raising my hand in front of the whole group. I just raised my hand and someone would come over, and, you know, as I got lost into the database, they'd get me back on path, you know what I mean? And so that's a little bit embarrassing when you are often lost somewhere and having to tell the whole group that you're often lost. So that's why we've tailored this workshop. I mean, obviously we have to do it virtually, so that's why these breakout rooms are doing what we're doing. So they are smaller groups, like you said. And so if that date doesn't look good for you, that's no big deal. I mean, you know what? I mean, we're going to be, in fact, a law firm has asked us to do it to their team, and you know, you can set up a private workshop. You know what I mean? And so, you know, very flexible. This was just our first cut at it, and obviously, I think we're going to. I think Amanda, in particular, will be following up with maybe a couple of survey questions. We welcome your input on how to make this better. We did a couple demos to, like I said, to try to figure this out. But we certainly welcome your constructive comments on how to improve this and make it more accessible.